If you've followed the news lately, you've probably heard the names of Apple, Amazon, Google, and Epic Games a lot more than you might usually. That's because all of these companies are currently embroiled in lawsuits, challenging how they operate, and they could result in big changes for how we interact with the platforms that they've created. But what makes these very public spats so special? It's because they all revolve around one very special word: antitrust. Antitrust is a fancy word that essentially means abusing your position in a particular market, allowing you to unfairly restrict your competition. An example could be the Major League Baseball system in the USA. It is the only top-level baseball league and therefore is a monopoly. The only reason it doesn't get sued week in, week out is that a Supreme Court ruling in 1922, somehow, stated that the organisation's business did not constitute interstate commerce. Now here is a map of all the MLB teams in the US, and I guess having 30 teams scattered around the country doesn't count as interstate. So, how do the makers of the iPhone, the biggest internet company in the world's biggest search engine, and the makers of Fortnite have anything to do with this? Let's start with that last one, Epic Games. Back in August 2020, Epic silently updated Fortnite to avoid Apple and Google's in-app payment systems as part of the Fortnite Mega Drop, a permanent discount on the cost of the in-game currency V-Bucks. Doing this is a breach of both Apple's and Google's developer agreement, both of which state that developers who want to offer digital services in their app must use their in-app purchase system. And in accordance with this, Apple took down Fortnite within a matter of hours of the change being made. In response, Epic then filed a 60-page lawsuit against Apple, and later Google, who eventually did the same, arguing antitrust violations against both companies. In the main lawsuit, Epic alleges Apple has a monopoly on the iOS app distribution market and the iOS in-app payment processing market. Now those are two very specific definitions, and for good reason. Epic can't argue with any evidence that Apple has a monopoly on mobile devices. Apple has less than 30% market share for the iPhone alone. But what Epic is arguing here is that Apple has a monopoly on how consumers access apps and pay for things within those apps. In those markets, Epic has a much stronger argument. iOS is much more locked down compared to, say, macOS, where you can freely download stuff from outside the Mac App Store, as you can only go through the App Store on your iPhone or iPad, unless you were to jailbreak your device, something only a very small number of users actually end up doing. Now that trial has now finished hearing evidence, and while it's taken 3 weeks, it's provided some interesting insights into not just Apple and Epic, but how other tech companies operate. We found out that Microsoft sells Xbox consoles at a loss, subsidizing them with the much larger profitability from the sales of games and service subscriptions on the Xbox platform. And that Apple did internally debate bringing iMessage to Android in what would have been a clear competitor to WhatsApp. In the end, they didn't, because iMessage is the #1 most difficult reason to leave the Apple universe. Phil Schiller, the former head of Apple's marketing team, concurred, saying that moving iMessage to Android will hurt us more than help us. That right there is a key part of Epic's strategy against Apple. Lock in through products that become ubiquitous and near essential through the sheer number of users using them and the pain of stopping using them. Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers has given little away through her oversight of the trial, but she did ask some pertinent questions to Tim Cook in the final days, indicating that she is critical of Apple's practices in some way, such as her view that there is no competition to Apple's IAP service within iOS. We won't get a verdict for weeks, months even, as judges are busy people, but as Ian Scher from CNET rightly puts it, the lawsuit could change the way antitrust is seen in the age of big tech. Time to switch gears now, this time to Amazon. The District of Columbia, the small municipality that houses the US Capitol and the rest of the government, has sued the retail giant on the grounds that its practices have unfairly raised prices for consumers, It focuses on a price parity clause in the contracts for third-party sellers using Amazon's platform, forcing them to list products at the same price in other marketplaces. Now that was actually removed in March 2019, but a nearly identical clause was put in after that, called the fair pricing policy. The key argument is that by making retailers set a price that accounts for Amazon's fees and charges across all marketplaces, some of which may offer lower fees for selling, consumers are offered less choice and higher prices. Now, this lawsuit only focuses on DC, but is still a change in tack for antitrust lawsuits, which have all focused on primarily tech-based companies, not retail. Still, if successful, it could result in changes to Amazon's policies that could make shopping that little bit cheaper for consumers. Final example now, this time across the pond to the European Union. Regulators from the EU gave Google a $5 billion fine for abusing the dominance of its Android mobile operating system. According to the decision, Google unfairly favoured its own services by forcing smartphone makers to pre-install Google apps alongside the Google Play Store. For those who don't know, Google Play services are a key part of consumer Android devices and are a collection of APIs and packages that facilitate the use of Google Play on an Android device. To not include them would vastly reduce the mass market appeal of any Android device, other than those that come with a de-Googlified OS, such as Amazon's Fire tablets. As such, Google got an unprecedented fine for its actions. That fine, though, was only just under a quarter of its quarterly revenue. Google's rivals use this fact, and others, to suggest that despite the fine, the search engine still isn't being fair. In response to the rulings from the EU, Google set up an auction process to determine which search services were shown to EU users when setting up their device. DuckDuckGo, a well-known privacy-focused offering, said that they were priced out of the auctions, mainly due to Microsoft's dominance in them. So you might be wondering how this affects you, using your smartphone, tablet or computer at home. In technology, competition is what drives innovation and user experience. The reason Apple has to make a new iPhone every year is that Android devices could seem more appealing to customers if it gains more features that are better than iOS. In retail, having multiple stores is what results in lower prices for consumers when purchasing their goods. In the UK, I'm able to choose between multiple different broadband providers for me to access the internet, such as Virgin Media, BT, TalkTalk, etc. In some parts of the USA, competition in that space is non-existent, and this allows companies to drive up their prices. When they're the only option, they're guaranteed that customer base, and they can charge whatever they want. These lawsuits are about better user experience while using services with huge user bases, and if even one of them succeeds, it could fundamentally change how we use our devices. Forever. Thank you for watching. This took a lot of takes, mainly because I have a teleprompter that likes to turn off. So if you enjoyed this video, you may want to check out the one I made about child trust funds. Quite similar, and it's quite informative and quite relevant for people of my age as well. Or you can check out the one I made about getting the COVID jab. That was also a pretty fun video to make. There is one about Eurovision, but Eurovision is over now, which is kind of sad. Hey ho, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.